all of these men, decent, dedicated people. And, I didn't know all the men on the Warren Commission, but impugning a lot of the integrity of a lot of these people. It's just getting to the point where it's disgusting. The mercenary side of this, or whatever happens to be the motivation that there's a paranoia that I hear coming through your guest about everything having to do with government and authority anyway. And I think Oliver Stone shares the same sort of paranoia.
Okay, let's let our guest respond to that. I'm sure that you've heard this before, and I think the caller does have a certain point. It is difficult to imagine all of this just sitting out there intact, this great conspiracy that we are run by this secret government, and every administration that comes in is somehow co-opted by magic brain waves or something.
Sir, I really respect your feelings and your opinion in this. Just as I respect any soldier who is wounded or loses his life abroad for whatever reason for his country. But just as President Lincoln's his guard went out and had a drink at the key moment when Booth then shot Lincoln, you have to remember that President Kennedy's Secret Service detail was out drinking until 4 o'clock in the morning. They had very little rest. The driver of the car put the brakes on. You can see the lights on throughout the whole shooting. He didn't step on it until the president's head was blown off. There were a whole lot of things wrong with the Secret Service protection. And, in fact, the House of Representatives made a finding in that respect that it was woefully inadequate. And so, sometimes we have to face the criticism. I may be paranoid. I may be a little bit crazy. I never denied that. I'm afraid of the people that don't know they're crazy or who are above criticism.
Are you suggesting that the Secret Service was actively involved in this, or just sloppy?
I haven't suggested that, but somebody lured them to that bar. They could have been drugged. I think that it's possible that somebody did betray the president. After all, we know in many assassinations around the world, it's often somebody in the guard. In India, when Gandhi was killed, turned out to be two of the guards who were involved. You can't ensure the political viability of everybody in your protective screen.
Now to Macon, Georgia. Hello.
Yes, I have 3 quick questions.
Well, very quick ones.
Are these books going to be available on Talking Books for the blind? 2.
Well, let's do them one at a time. Talking Books for the blind?
I believe so. High treason, certainly I signed the papers with the Library of Congress for that, and I'll be sure that Carolyn Graff does the same thing for the new book.
Okay, second one?
2 questions. One, have you heard, I noticed on Unsolved Mysteries the other week they had a thing about Robert Kennedy, and said there may have been a second gunman on his killing. And 2, if you're worried about these men in power that took President Kennedy's life and Jackie ran away from them, wouldn't you be afraid that they would try to, assassinate you and to shut you up? Because you...
I had a government job for a brief period of time, and I was almost blown up in my automobile by a federal employee whom I knew quite well. People play rough in this life.
By blown up, are you talking about a car bomb?
No, the mechanism of the engine was set to gasoline pouring all over the engine to explode. I knew the guy.
And you know
quite
for a fact that a federal employee did it. Was that person
he was a
tried
friend of
and
mine
convicted?
a person that I worked with.
Was that person tried and convicted for this?
No,
crime?
I never said anything about it. But the point of this is that people play very rough in this life. Lots of people get killed in the United States every year. Several journalists are killed around the world. Many journalists are killed every year.
Somebody tries to kill you. I must say I'm a little different from you. My tendency would be
the best thing
to go to the cops, or my first gut reaction would be to
take. Jim, I took care of it my way.
Which
Don't
is what?
read anything into that.
Well, I don't have to.
Okay, we'll go on to the next question.
Well, all right.
We'll go on to the next question.
You took care of it your way. You're not going to tell us what that is.
I don't have to.
Well, you don't have to.
What was the next question?
No, you don't have to. That's
right.
Very true, sir. The next question regards the TV show which recently purported a second gunman theory regarding the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
That's no theory. Several witnesses there saw 2 other guns present. It wasn't just one. It was 2 guns present, one belonging to the security guard who was suspected in this. Doesn't mean he did it. But there's no question, because Robert Kennedy had powder burns showing that a pistol had been fired within it 1 to 2 inches from his head. And certainly Sirhan was never any closer than several feet.
That's certainly the thrust of what was on that TV show. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more. Our guest is Harrison Edward Livingstone. The book High Treason 2 will be back after these messages. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Jim.
Hi. Fine.
Very interesting show. I will give you that much credit, but I have a lot of trouble with your guest.
Okay.
To me, he sounds like a tremendous snake oil salesman trying to make money off of the Kennedy assassination. I just wanted to ask him one question. How can you expect to have any credibility with your listeners or your readers when you won't give Jim straight answers to the questions that he's asking you about things that have happened to you? And every time he asks you a question you don't have a good answer for, you just refuse to answer it. And that, to me, just destroys your credibility completely. And I'd like to know what you have to say about that.
Clarksville, I think anybody who answers a lot of personal questions on national radio is a jerk.
Well,
and secondly, I'm not obligated to do that. I'm here to talk about serious evidence. If you'd read anything that I've written, you would have to deal with that. Personality and character assassination's got nothing to do with anything.
You're under no obligation, no, but the caller does make a point that when you make these sensational charges, that some of these questions might tend to buttress your credibility. Chicago, hello.
Hello, Mr. Livingstone.
Yeah, I want to, before you go on, I want to respond to what Jim just said. That's a completely false statement. He's trying to attack my credibility by saying that I'm obligated to answer any question whatsoever about my personal life.
Not any question.
No, that's what you're saying.
Not in the least.
No, the caller
just
said
relevant.
that if I don't answer every question that the man asked me, and I've answered almost every question here as straightforward as I can, but I'm not obligated to answer just anything that's thrown at me.
Well, I don't think I've thrown anything at you that was unreasonable, but what is your question, Chicago?
Well, I think, really to get to the truth of the matter, all you have to do is trace Oswald's connection with the intelligence community going back to even before his days in the Marines when he was a student pilot with David Ferry. Then when he was with the Marines, they trained him in Russian language in Japan. He subsequently defected to the USSR, came back to the USA with no interrogation or surveillance or anything like that. And then he was assigned to New Orleans in a disinformation campaign called Fair Play for Cuba.
Okay, now we've got about 45 seconds.
I agree with that entirely, Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Not only did Oswald go to Russia in that time frame, but 9 other men from the Department of the Navy and the Marines in the United States Navy went to Russia, and they were all retrieved at the same time. And then, we ought to talk about the evidence of Oswald's involvement or lack of it in John Kennedy's murder. But he clearly was an intelligence agent. He was totally literate in the Russian language, according to de Mohrenschiltz and others in the Russian community that knew him.
Were the Russians involved in the assassination?
No, of course not.
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
no, there's no possibility of that having happened.
Well,
for one thing, because our entire foreign policy changed when John Kennedy died.
Well, we're not going to. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. We'll take a break, come back with more, right here on the Mutual Broadcasting System. Back to your calls, 703-685-2177. Our guest is Harrison Edward Livingstone, and his book is High Treason 2. We go to Pittsburgh. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Livingstone.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to, first of all, say thank you very much for being brave enough and willing to speak to the public about what I am convinced, and I hope that most of America is convinced as being the truth of this matter. I'd like to ask you, in light of what's happening presently, based on my belief, and I think your shared belief, that there is an establishment that is attempting to control certainly the events of this country, if not the events, hopefully, eventually, of the entire world, what do you think is going to happen in reference to a sneak guy in the way of Ross Perot coming in, sneaking into this election and potentially threatening the control of this establishment? Do you fear that potentially this could be another assassination, a repeat of the 60s in a way? And I'm curious as to whether or not you feel that the Republican establishment party feels that they're really, truly threatened by this. And I'd like to follow up.
Well, all right, go ahead.
First of all, this has got nothing to do with why I'm here, which is to talk about the evidence in John Kennedy's murder. But I will say that because of the fact that the people do not directly control the electoral process in the United States, and presidents are not elected by the people, they're elected by the Electoral College, to have somebody like Ross Perot or anybody come in threatens the system which has always been a charade.
Well, when was the last
if nobody
time
gets a majority, it goes into the House and the Senate.
Granted, it's an archaic system, but we haven't even had to go to the House of Representatives since,
it's happened.
John Quincy Adams, I think, was
Something
the only
like
time. But in fact, the Electoral College is an archaic system. But can you tell me the last time that the Electoral College and the popular vote disagreed and the person with fewer popular votes got elected? 1892, I believe, or somewhere in that general era.
No, it happened in this century also.
Not when someone got fewer electoral votes. No, Nixon got more votes than Humphrey. Kennedy got more votes than Nixon.
Yeah.
At no time in this century.
But the gentleman's wondering whether or not Perot would be assassinated. I think even though he's a billionaire and it's still not too clear where he's coming from, he is such a wild card that it greatly threatens the system, unless, of course, this is all planned for some purpose. I believe that our political process is being programmed to break down. It is breaking down. The government really doesn't function very well anymore.
You say that Perot might either be a victim of this conspiracy or a part of it, and you're not sure which?
Well, he does come from the Dallas power structure and their motives. I think he's an honorable man. I believe that. I believe Bush is basically
Why
an
should you think
man.
that? I mean, it seems like we're filled with nothing but dishonorable types in your pantheon. Why would you suddenly grant those two men honor?
Well, a lot of strange things happen to people.
If Bush is an honorable man and he's been, in fact, co-opted by this system, an honorable man would step forward. By definition, every president since John Kennedy must be a dishonorable man, or he would step forward and expose this great electoral lie that we're living.
No, they're puppets of it.
Well, if you're an honorable man, you would not be a puppet of it.
You could be an honorable man and be unwitting. Jimmy Carter, I don't think, consciously understood what he had walked into.
How could you be unwittingly out of control? If you're the president, you try to do something that is within your presidential prerogatives, and you are circumvented. You fire somebody, you move, you find out what's going on.
Yeah, but when a nation is as old as ours, we have a very Byzantine government. It's the second oldest major established government in the history of the world at this time.
What's older?
They become British government. It becomes very Byzantine after a couple of hundred years, and there are layers and layers and layers of meaning. You have bureaucracies, as they found in England. It doesn't matter if you have liberals elected or conservatives elected. They have no power whatsoever to get the bureaucracy to do something the bureaucracy doesn't want to do. The bureaucratic phenomenon, as the French described it, really takes over.
Well, they keep the things functioning day to day. But you can't say, for example, that Ronald Reagan didn't change the course of this country.
And the bureaucracy becomes such a weighted anchor in the national life that it can be easily circumvented by very powerful people who can move right around it, do an end run around it.
You would grant you, would you not, that Ronald Reagan changed the course of the country?
Vacuums.
Whether it was good or bad, Ronald Reagan obviously changed the course of the country, and it wasn't good for a lot of bureaucrats.
He's bankrupted the treasury of this United States. He's done more damage.
I'm well aware of the serious
experienced.
questions about the man, but I'm also saying that he did make major changes, and he clearly was a pain in the butt for a lot of bureaucrats. Now, how come they didn't get rid of him? Because he was a real problem. He was costing them jobs.
He was a tool of the people that I'm talking about that wanted Kennedy and people like that out of the way. Reagan represented the big banks, the big money in the United States, big business. The middle class is being destroyed. The small farmers being destroyed. After all, Jefferson said the strength of a nation is directly proportionate to the numbers of its people that own their own farms, their own homes, and their own businesses. And that's not what this country is all about today. It's about big business and conglomerates.
We go to Omaha. You're on the air. Hello.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Hey, a little bit of leeway. First of all, Jim, what's a phone company that doesn't cut you off every 4 minutes when you're ringing?
Well, I'm told that these two don't. Sprint, which has a 10333 access code, and MCI, which has a 10222 access code.
Because Monday morning I'm switching. But
well, you don't have to switch, you just dial those numbers and you're automatically on them.
Yeah, that's okay. AT&T, though, can take a flying leap.
Well, whatever. I mean, we're just here to help you get through. What do you have for our guest?
I think big-time bull, because 19 out of 20 neurologists at the House Select Committee on Assassination said that the backward motion of the head was a natural reaction. And, Jim, if the guest near...
you made that up, sir. You made that up.
I read that in, if I'm not mistaken, GQ or one of those magazines about Oliver Stone's meeting.
Oh, that's a men's model magazine?
Well, I've certainly read the charge that there are pathologists who have made the statement that the head motion in the
neuromuscular
film can be explained by a shot from the rear. Now, I grant you, to the layman's eye, that doesn't look obvious, but I have heard such a statement as the caller is saying. I don't know about the 19 out of 20.
It's completely unscientific to respond to your charge. That's a totally ridiculous concept. The human head is not an engine, and you cannot have a jet effect from it unless there's combustion of a high-octane fuel or a kerosene, something of that nature, and there can be no neuromuscular snap when the head is hit, and it's attached to a neck and a body weighing 100 and some pounds. It's just not possible. The stories that you've heard about this kind of thing are completely unscientific. I have seen numerous films of executions of men at posts who are shot in the head, and believe me, the head goes with the bullet. There's just no way. If you're hit in the stomach with a bullet, your head may go forward as your body bends backwards. Your abdomen will be thrown backwards with the bullet, so your head comes forward as you double over. But if your head is hit in men in battle, they're taken right off their feet and they go backwards with the bullet.
Okay, caller?
The thing is, you're calling my statement ridiculous, and you have no knowledge of this. I mean, I know you looked at the photographs and all this, and you write books, but I could write a book too, and I could make all kinds of things up like you do.
Go ahead.
That doesn't give me any more credibility than you are. And I would say that neurologists, doctors, and the people that said it have more, even if they didn't look at anything, than you do.
Let me respond to that by saying what I'm dealing with here is primarily things that I can prove absolutely, and that is forgery of photographs and x-rays. You get this material and study it, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because the x-rays show that the face is missing and the photographs show that the face is undamaged. You find a way to explain that. They can't find a way to explain it, so they come up with phony articles. And what you're giving me is a phony explanation.
We'll take a break. We'll come back with more. Our guest tonight is the author of the book High Treason 2, and it is published by Carroll and Graff. And if you want to get a copy of this book, all you have to do is write.
Here again, Jim Bohannon.
More calls for our guest tonight, the author of the book High Treason 2, Harrison Livingstone. Of course, he also wrote the bestseller High Treason, and this one is published by the folks at Carroll and Graff. It's subtitled The Great Cover-Up, The Assassination of President John Kennedy. Here's Columbus, Ohio. Hello.
Yeah, do you think there's a possibility that Kennedy got hit in the head with a rock, man?
With a rock?
Yeah. Not as hard as you did, no. But
believe me, you could stand up on that grassy knoll and hit him with a brick. It's that close. You don't need any kind of a rifle or a sight.
That's one thing you don't know about that because of the angle of the camera shots that took place that day. But my first impression when I entered Dealey Plaza was, gosh, this is a little teeny place.
Yeah, and another point about that, if you were standing in that window trying to fire down on the car as it came out from underneath that tree, you're actually firing almost straight down on it. It's an all but impossible shot. What you see in all these trajectory analysis, computer projections, and all this kind of stuff, I think it's silly. If anybody was going to shoot at that car from that window, you would shoot at it as the car approached the window. You only have to move the barrel of the rifle a few feet from one direction to the other, and it was a very simple shot to shoot at it as it approached you. I don't believe anybody fired from that window.
What was Lee Harvey Oswald doing?
He was eating his lunch in the lunchroom. He was actually seen there a couple minutes before the motorcade.
Does it matter then that he had connections with the Russians? Was he or was he not a part of this whole thing?
I think he may have known something about it. In fact, I think he had the impression that he was spying on it for the government, on a conspiracy. But the conspirators were able to set him up in that fashion. He clearly was an intelligence operative, as your caller said a little while before. But he had no powder burns on his face. There were no fingerprints on the weapons. The Heidel identification was not on him when he was arrested when he was first taken into the patrol car. The chief of police said they couldn't even place him in that window. They couldn't even go on to trial with him. It's well documented now that he very much revered John Kennedy. The world of him, obviously he wouldn't be shooting at John Connally if that was his target.
He was part of the Fair Play for Cuba committee, right?
Well, I mean, I did that job for the government too when I worked for a newspaper.
What about the picture of him with the rifle?
Marina Oswald has insisted to us that she was standing underneath that stairway when she took pictures like this. She did take something like this, she says, but these aren't the pictures. The pictures are clearly forgeries.
We go to Atlanta.
Actually, Jim, almost everything in this case is either planted, forged, or stolen.
Which again involves a lot of people. But Atlanta, you're on the air. Hello.
Jim.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at your impatience, and I think this is a very difficult subject, I understand, but you really are not. You jump from one subject to the other and don't let the man explain things.
I've given him all night to explain things, caller.
You're doing that to me right now. I'm telling you.
Well, if you want to critique how I do the show, you can do it on open phone. You've got something to say to Mr. Livingstone, you can say it now.
Well, what I have to say to him is, the only problem I have with him is that I think he's a little bit disorganized with his material, and but the evidence is there, and I support what he's doing. I support everything that he's, the evidence that he has.
Okay, you have a question for him, or something you'd like him to respond to?
But I'd just like to tell him, that I think he should work on presenting the material better, because I know what he's going through. This is a very hard thing to present.
Okay, your response, Mr. Livingstone.
I think the gentleman is quite correct. I do get slightly disorganized when I'm under a lot of strain from people that are asking all sorts of questions all over the block, and I can't concentrate on the basic areas that involve my research and where I'm trying to get out new information in this case. When they just want to hear opinion about this or that or my life story, yes, it becomes quite confusing, and it's unfair to the listener, but that's the way America operates.
We go to Austin. Hello.
Hi, I'd just like to point out regarding reluctance to answer questions that you had to ask your first two questions 3 times before you got an answer to them.
So does this discredit my research and my writing?
I think that it makes it very questionable on the grounds that you seem to not want to talk about answers to his questions.
I've answered all questions except the color of the hair on my chest and other kinds of questions that I don't feel are appropriate.
And reluctantly, on a couple cases at least. I didn't like Oliver Stone's movie because its sole purpose, as far as I can tell, like so many of his movies, is to sow discontent through unproven and purely speculatory evidence, as far as I can tell. And if anything constitutes high treason to me, that's it. You have stated that the democratic process is subverted by blackmail, I think, anyway. And by doing so, you have now classified yourself, in my mind, as being guilty of such treason. So tell me...
because I question how things are going in this country?
I am not going to read your book until you clear yourself of such a statement. So tell me, what is the
statement?
What is your whole purpose behind doing this? Is it to get the facts out? Is it to expose somebody of the very few who are still in politics? Or why should I give a damn about who killed Kennedy anyway?
It's not necessary for everybody to have the same degree of caring that we have. I worked for a man who became a U.S. Senator who was very close to John Kennedy. We care. We're not going to get over this murder, the great tragedy that it brought this nation and the very many people who believed in Kennedy and what we lost. It's a hard thing to live with. Believe me, I don't make any money out of this. I hire police officers. I pay a lot of people. I have a major research operation underway. I don't really give a damn if you care or if you don't care. But there's plenty of people out there who do care and who take this very seriously.
And you can count me among that number, too. I would have to disagree with the caller and in fact, agree with our guest. One of the rare occasions tonight, I damn sure care. And if there's something to this, then we ought to get to the bottom of it. There should be no statute of limitations on blowing away presidents. Omaha, hello.
Hi, Jim. I was kind of irritated at the beginning of the show, but I've got to thank you now because this has been pure entertainment. I've enjoyed every second.
Well, I hope it's been a little bit of information, too.
I don't know about much information, but it has been entertaining. It's
okay. Well, I'll take that.
Very funny. Sir, as far as I had made a promise to myself to not to listen to any more shows concerning the Kennedy assassination and things of that nature, just because I've heard nothing but accusations made, and I don't know whether there was a conspiracy or not. It wouldn't surprise me if there was, but I decided I wasn't going to listen anymore until there was good proof. Now, Larry's promo the other night said that you were going to present not accusations, but just merely facts that you had found. All I've heard tonight is pure accusations. The few facts that you have presented, I question with your ridiculous multi-government conspiracy theories. And the main question I have to ask for you is, how could you still be standing if all of these ideas and this conspiracy is so large? How can you be standing there making these accusations and still be living today?
I mean, if they're willing to kill a president, why not you?
We're into another generation here, and when certain people died whom we believe were involved in the conspiracy, a lot of us breathed easier, but there were a lot of deaths, as you know. Secondly, I have some backup at this point. There are powerful people in my corner, too. I would like to say that if you study my writing, I think you will find plenty of information. But I'm on a radio show here that has multi-purposes. And I don't necessarily say it's wrong.
What do you mean a radio show that has multi-purposes?
The gentleman said it's very entertaining, and that's show business.
Well, that's not. I'm not here to conduct show business. Yeah. And anyone who's listened to me for the past 11 years knows
let me answer a specific point here.
Well, I'm sorry.
I try to present hard evidence as best as I can, but obviously when that evidence points toward a conspiracy and it's pretty conclusive, then I'm under pressure to explain, well, who did it? Why did it happen? So I try to be honest with that. If I was to shut up about it and not answer it, then you'll criticize me for that. So I'm in a no-win situation here. And so I try to treat it straight, knowing that I'm going to take it in the neck for it, but nevertheless I'm going to tell people what I think if they push me hard enough. And I've come for great criticism for doing that. And I always have had a lot of criticism for that.
We'll take a break. We'll be back after these messages. We'll get back to our calls here shortly for our guest tonight, Harrison Edward Livingstone, the book High Treason 2, and it is published by Carroll and Graff. You can get a copy of this by calling our toll-free number, 1-800-831-8900. 24 hours a day. You can call that number, pay with any major credit card, 1-800-831-8900. You wish to say something briefly about your research?
Yes, Jim. I have been, in my book, High Treason 2, and the first book, I've been introducing entirely new evidence in the conspiracy that murdered John Kennedy, and that deals with the forgery of the autopsy materials, and that this material was used to trick the Chief Justice of the United States. Nobody else has been really dealing with this on the level that I have done with many interviews of witnesses and the studies that we made of this material.
All right. We go to Little Rock now. Hello.
Little Rock. Hi,
yeah.
My name is Bob.
Uh-huh.
It's not just the conspiracy with John Kennedy, but the upcoming Earth Summit, the conspiracy with George Bush, and all the things he has not been as an environmental president. How does this play into, the whole thing?
If at all.
Well, I'll let Jim answer that question.
Well, I don't know of any connection whatsoever. Okay, I think we have found a fellow with an axe to grind, which is certainly an axe worthy of grinding. We'll talk about that maybe during open phones. Toronto, you're on the air. Hello.
Yes, I got a few quick questions.
Okay, we got time for about one, maybe. We'll see what we got.
Okay, I just wondered, first, is the author aware of a book, Double Cross, about this whole...
Yes, I know the author. He lives in my town. It's a phony book. He claims that a Secret Service man stood up and shot the president. It ignores all the other shots that were fired. And that author had to change the wording of the autopsy report, which you'll find quotes for in his book, actually just changed the language of the autopsy report in order to get the trajectories that he wants.
The last 2 points quickly about Dorothy Kilgallen, the scenario there about the judge, Joe Brown, and that she had an interview with Ruby that no one else had, therefore she had to be killed. And you said that his face had been damaged, but I thought there was just...
Undamaged. His face was undamaged.
30 seconds.
Yeah. His face was undamaged. The skull X-rays show that he has no face on the right side. It's completely missing. So there's a big conflict between the X-rays and the eyewitness testimony and the photographs. None of it jives.
Interview with Ruby.
The Ruby interview with Kilgallen. Not only did she die, but her friend died at the same time, and many other people died, of course.
And, of course, we have run out of time. We want to thank you for being with us tonight.
Jim, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Harrison Livingstone is our guest. The book is High Treason 2. Open phones coming up here on the Mutual Broadcasting System.